Thank you very much for having us also today and for participating in the seminar. I think I would echo the way you started your presentation and the way you ended. We should never take the EA agreement for granted, and so we're happy as much as we can that we can do this outreach to explain what it means. This is the same thing we do also in the EU. We don't take the EU for granted, and that's why we have always, we're very happy to explain why we do things and how we do things. That would be, I would say, how I would like to look at the way the EU looks at the EA agreement. We had yesterday the State of the Union address by the President in the Parliament, a very important part. I will not do a State of the EA agreement, that would be immodest, but allow me at least to give our perspective of how we see this agreement. And I would say it's not an agreement. Of course, because we have a stable and predictable relationship, we have an agreement, but it is a relationship. And it's a relationship which is built on an agreement, but also on the way we make it run. And I think this is not only something that is just written in the text of the agreement. And what is in the agreement, but also what underlies everything, I think, is the values that we share in doing what we do. This is democracy, rule of law, respect for fundamental freedoms, here in the very heart of the European continent. Values which I think we should recall because they underlie everything we do and the way we do it also through the institutions and through our political dialogues. The EA is the deepest and widest partnership the EU has with any third country in the world. That bears recalling because we have relationships with some very large countries, but this level of integration is one we have not attained with any other country outside the European Union. And why is that? Because we were able to extend the internal market to 3 countries. What really creates the core of the EU was extended to 3 countries, and also beyond the internal market on research, technological development, environment, culture. We're also able to cooperate through the structures of the EA or building on the good cooperation that we've established so far under the EA agreement. And also, I would add in this, I'll come to it at the end, there's an element of solidarity, which is also reflected in the cohesion contribution that the EFTA states have been giving from the very early days of this agreement. And here also, this is important to show that we share a common purpose and objectives. So as I said, the way I would like to present things is what are we doing and why are we doing it and how do we do it in the EU. And for us, both are equally important. So what do we do and why do we do it? Because the idea is to extend the internal market to 3 very close neighbors with whom we have not only a geography but also an economy that are integrated. And we do this in a spirit of cooperation and in an agreement that evolves. So it's not stuck in time. It is really something that we're trying to evolve over time because the EU and the way we operate the market needs to be relevant for its time. That's the way we've been also able to respond to some recent crises. You mentioned health, but I think the pandemic, but there are other crises that we went through, the financial crisis earlier when our banks were all in need of some lifelines. And today we have the Russian aggression in Ukraine, which is also something which will have deep, not only geopolitical, but also very concrete impact on important policies, starting with the energy policy, in which also the internal market on energy, in which the EFTA states are participating. We discussed the backlog. There we still have some work to do, but I think we should keep that in mind that it's not only reducing the backlog. The backlog is something that is also important because it sends messages that we are working on the same basis. We will also be rebuilding our economies, very important. That goes after the financial, the COVID crisis. And we, I think, here also share some priorities. It's the twin transition, digital, environmental. Here also, this is something that we've integrated early on into the EEA agreement. But we're also looking beyond. We've also been able to extend the cooperation in the same way the EU has extended to create a European Defence Fund. Some EFTA states have decided to participate in that effort, and I think that's how we show that we can go beyond the purely economic. Maybe that's also something that is important to show the relevance still today of that agreement. So this is the why do we do this and what do we do? I think I would just like to spend a bit of time on how do we do it. I know this whole seminar will probably explain how it's done on the EFTA side, but I would just want to give you a little view on how this works within the EU machinery. Hopefully it won't be as boring as a class on EU institutions, but I will just try to use the life of EU Act as it is thought of and how it ends being integrated into the the EEA agreement. So very early on, there will be in the EU what you need is a proposal from the Commission, and this needs to be something which is within the scope of the EU agreements. We have, I would say, had a dynamic approach to what is within the scope of the treaties to respond to the needs of the day. At this early stage already, we try to be transparent in that we publish our proposals. We have a long legislative process in which the EFTA states contribute through the EFTA comments. There are some exchanges that take place. What for us very important is to make sure that at the very beginning we identify what could be EEA relevant. And that you will see sometimes on the proposed Commission proposal, we'll have a little banner which says EEA relevant, the marking. It's not only something that we do to signal, it's because we need to bring in that dimension early on and make sure that the day when it gets adopted at the end of the EU process, it can also trickle down in the EEA agreement. Once the Act is adopted in the EU, starts the dialogue we have. So we put this marking, or maybe we forgot to put that marking, EEA relevant. Is it actually EEA relevant? Is it something that we need or we want to integrate into the EEA agreement? If it's within the scope of the agreement and it's relevant, we think it should be integrated. In some instances, there will be a possibility for the EFTA states to join. This is the question of the union programs. So there is a possibility to join at that time. So we'll have this dialogue, and we will then do the work of trying to identify which parts of the acts, or which acts, or which parts of the acts are relevant. This, I think you gave the figures of how many acts we integrated last year, 660. I think we're almost at 300 this year. It's very important. That's the quantity. But what matters is also the quality. And we need to make sure that we integrate, because some of these acts are things that they're running normally legislation. But what we need to make sure is that across the board, we prioritize also those acts which are key to ensuring that the internal market functions and ensuring this level playing field. And this is the reason why we are so keen to making sure that we have an integration of the acquis on time, because the same operators operate on the same market and they should do so on the basis of the same conditions. When we receive a proposal from the EFTA Secretariat for an act to be integrated, it can take two tracks. If there are no adaptations, so it's just the act being incorporated into the EEA agreement, that goes fairly easily through the Commission. The Council early on gave us an empowerment to say, Commission, you can do that, and you will adopt that in the context of the EA Joint Committee on behalf of the EU. Where it might be that in certain cases, the EFTA states ask for adaptations because they were not, maybe something came up, or it wasn't necessarily reflected in the act through the comments, or because the legislative process ended in a way which was not fitted to the realities of the three EFTA states. In that case, what happens is we look, is this a mere technical adaptation, or does this go beyond? If it's a mere technical adaptation, here again, we can do it, and for many acts, for the majority, I would say 95 to 98% of the acts, we can do it at the Commission. So we can go into the Joint Committee as a union and say, it's okay. In those cases where the modification, the adaptation goes beyond, we have to go to the Council. And just to give two examples, that's where it has a financial implication, or it involves the participation in some EU bodies or Commission expert groups. In these cases, we, as a Commission, go to the Council to have the position of the EU established, and the position that would then be expressed in the EA Joint Committee, which takes place 8 times a year. And this at some time, but I think it's also good in making sure that this agreement is not taken for granted. For us, it's very important that we can have that discussion also with the member states, because at the end of the day, it's also the agreement that they will have to respect on a daily basis and give those same rights to the EFTA states domestically. Once the act is incorporated, the work is not done quite yet, because as you mentioned, we have the possibility that some EFTA states might declare that they have constitutional requirements they need to go through. In the recent past, or not so recent past, we have seen quite an increase in the number of those constitutional requirements. While we recognize that this is a right under the EA agreement, this also comes with responsibility. And we have seen that a number, and I would say the number of those acts which are still pending constitutional requirements, even after 6 months of adoption within the Joint Committee, has increased, and the length of this delay has also increased. This is something which, in that meantime, is troubling because you're not playing with the same rules. In that case, I think that's something that we will be looking particularly at. In the same way, we're also looking at ensuring that the backlog, which means all these acts that are EA relevant but haven't been integrated, not only can be reduced, not only in terms of quantities, because some acts have a lot of, I think we're going to integrate soon things about wine and spirits and do 27 acts in one Joint Committee decision, but we also be looking at the quality. Are we sure that we have integrated all the acts that are really relevant? What is important also, and I speak of course in all quality as the Commission, is that when these acts are part of the law, this law is actually implemented. And that's why we have on the EFTA side the other pillar, and we have our brothers, sisters, cousins, call them as you want, the EFTA Surveillance Authority, and then later on the EFTA Court, if necessary, or also in parallel, which will help us make sure that that the law is actually implemented in the way that we think suits the good functioning of the internal market. So these are maybe just through this life of you will see this takes quite a bit of time. We're quite grateful to the EFTA states because I know they look at this very carefully. They try to do this in united fashion. They do this devoting quite some resources to having an EFTA Secretariat here in Brussels that prepares the work and also is in contact with our colleagues in the services. But you see, we shouldn't take it for granted. It's not a given, but it's really the example And I think it's still given when other third countries are thinking, oh, how close should I be to the European Union economically, politically? The EA is always very high, be it a staircase or in the models that you can have. It hasn't any, we haven't, there's no replica yet of the EA agreement, but you will know that we're having discussions with other partners on the European continent. There are different models of integration. That's the one that we have at this stage, and so we'll be. Everybody is looking carefully at how it works, and so will we. And we look forward to continuing the good work. Is it 27 years now? Let it be 57 years. Thank you very much, and happy to take any questions.